Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today, this is the long-awaited Shadowhunter build guide. I know it's been a long time coming, but it's finally time to reveal what my plans are. It's okay. First, two warnings. First, if you actually want to join groups, pug groups, and you don't want to, go through 1 million groups before you get invited, you should probably not play this build right now. And secondly, the build isn't finished, so until we get the 6th set, which will be with Vikes released later this month, until then we can't really practice and figure things out fully yet. So until then, this build is not finished, and I would probably not recommend you swap to it, but it's very cheap. And the damage is pretty good, very consistent damage output. It's not a good burst optimal damage build. It's not really a back attack focused build either, but it's mainly used for consistency, and it's very good at that. So I'll walk you through it, and yeah, let's get started. Okay, first and foremost, I'll walk you through the abilities, and we'll start with a low skill point ability, which is on 7, which is Slasher. This will be used as your counter. Now, you can replace this also with Sharpen Cut, with also 7 points, but I like to have the counter consistent in the build, so you don't have to swap it around all the time. A lot of bosses need counters, and it's good to have. Here, first of all, we have Bleed Effect and Forward Slash, plus the Judgment Rune. I will explain that in just a second when we go to Cruel Cutter, which is our one of our main damage abilities, and we actually play this without a without encroachment release. You can play with encroachment release, but it will need some adjustments in the build because you're not running any spec, obviously, because this is perfect suppression, and on top of that, you don't have enough generation in this specific setup. So Boomerang is better because of two different things. First of all, you don't need identity meter, right? And on top of that, it actually has more hits and it will trigger judgment or conviction in this case more consistently. So as you can see here, the rune here is conviction and the slasher one is judgment. Now, how this works is very simple. The first one, the conviction one, is always the one you want to use first, and it will give you a little buff when it procs this little time stop thing. And then you can use slasher, or whichever one has the judgment, which gives you a buff. Now, this buff gives you more mana regen, 100% more, so it doubles that. So that's one big issue of suppression as perfect suppression Shadowhunter, because we struggle a little bit with mana. Well, with this, not so much anymore. And on top of that, for when this actually procs, all of the abilities in a 5-second or whatever window will have their cooldown reduction reduced, and that includes your awakening as well. So keep that in mind. It's really important. So that is also one part of your combo game already. I'll go one quick rotation later on, which goes over the combos, or one specific one that I like to start with. But yeah, there you go. So then we have these two out of the way. You play Bleed Effect, Earth Attack, Boomerang. As I said, the only other option here would be Encroachment released. Everything else is basically set in stone. Bleed Effect will be important later as well. And then we have Demonic Slash, which is your main movement option. I like to play Rage on this because both times you actually click on this, if you have it on 10 points, can proc the Rage buff. So that being in mind, it's really nice to have the attack speed and movement speed whenever you need it, and it's low cooldown, so it's nice to have. You could probably play Quick Recharge as well, but I don't like to do that. Also interesting maybe is because I play Master of Evasion instead of Damage Amplification, because with the changes to the synergy, having damage amplification up from your grind chain alone is very, very easy, because it reapplies that over and over each time it ticks, as you can see. So it's still 10 seconds and I only have 6 seconds left, so I can basically have permanent synergy up with only one synergy ability, as you can see. And therefore, you don't really need that bonus amplification here. So I like to take dodge rate. You could even take damage, honestly. It doesn't really matter. I think all of these here are viable. And then you take, obviously, movement speed, mandatory, and chain charge, also mandatory. Then let's go to another main damage tool, which is Thrust Impact. We play that one with Overwhelm, because in this case, this is basically our only real stagger, ability. And the tripods are always stay the same as well. And a lot of builds you also play Enhanced Explosion instead of Deep Thrust, but Deep Thrust has a little bit more hits, and therefore with this build, which is a hit focused build because we play Lightning Fury, but we'll get to that, that's pretty important, right? So this is very basic, and you can't really change anything here. Then Grindchin, we already talked about that. Always the same setup as well. Eventually, maybe if you have enough crit, you don't have to run this anymore. But there's not really a whole lot of other options, because during the skill use, dodge rate is not very, you know, consistent. I just made the camera a little bit lighter, so it doesn't look like I sit in a cave as much, but I still do. So anyways, Spinning Weapon is our only encroachment release tool in this build. Encroachment release meaning it will actually use your identity meter, right? And you're probably wondering, how am I even generating enough? Every ability besides Decimate and Thrust Impact is generating meter, although not a lot. And that's why we only have one encroachment release tool. Obviously, your Awakening gives you a lot. So hitting that is pretty nice here for consistency's sake, but we only have one of those. So Spinning Weapon is one of your main damage tools, but also important, it's one of your most hits in the entire build. And well, the entire build is focused on hits. So as you can see here, we play Quick Prep, Sustain Enhancement, and Encroachment Release. Main reason why I'm not playing Bleed anymore here is because sometimes you just overstack your identity, and having this up more often is better, especially with the set, which I get into in just a second, the one I'm playing right now. Next up is Piercing Thorn, which gives you a bleed effect, which is very important to proc Lightning Fury. And Rotting Zone, which is also proccing your set and reapplies the bleeds. So that's also really nice to have. The rune here is Wealth. Spinning Weapon, by the way, we play Gale Wind. If I didn't, I think I forgot about that. Gale Wind on Spinning Weapon because it takes a while to get out. So having that on there is pretty good. Piercing Thorn, again, is gonna be run with Wealth. You could alternatively, if you have too much identity meter, play Bleed on this one as well, because it applies the bleed for a long time. And the last one is Massive Thorns. This one just makes it way more consistent, and as you can see, like, the field is really big with Massive Thorns, so hitting that consistently and also keeping the Rotting Zone ticks going is very easy with this, and just makes it easier to hit and more consistent, and the damage obviously increases as well. And then last but not least, we have Decimate, which is the other really big hitting ability outside of your Thrust Impact. With Bleed Effect, Encroachment, Discharge, and Cruel Hand, you could probably also alternatively run Attack Speed here, or even Cooldown Reduction. But I like to run the Bleed because, again, it's good for Lightning Fury, and, well, we'll get into that actually right now. The rune here is Focus because we have mana issues. If you don't have any mana issues, you could be running Gale Wind here, Quick Recharge, doesn't really matter. But Focus is nice because with this I basically have never any mana issues, and since we're not using a mana set, it's quite useful. So first, I'll show you the engravings really quick, which will change over time a little bit. Grudge, Keen Blunt, and Lightning Fury will always be maxed out. Adrenaline and Perfect Suppression can be depending on what you need. And I say that because later on in the game, you will probably be running 5 level 3 engravings and 1 level 1, or even 1 level 2 engraving as a 6th engraving, basically. And if that's the case, this will change a little bit, but we'll probably talk about more about the super end game setup once I can try out the full build. But right now, this is the gist of it. I will also show you the stats really quick. My main stat is crit, which gives us a lot of crit, as you can see, 58%. And swiftness, again, if we overstack crit a little bit too much, eventually I might go for another swiftness ring or something, or I will just get level 1 adrenaline instead of level 3, which gives us 15% crit as well. We run a lot of crit, mainly, well, Keen Blunt obviously needs a lot of crit to work, but Lightning Fury can crit, doesn't have any other amplifiers like back attack or something, and the set that I'm running right here also can't back attack or anything, so crit is one of the main tools to buff the damage. So I would recommend this as a very cheap setup because Lightning Fury is very cheap, so pairing that with very expensive engravings like Grudge or Keen Blunt is very easy. I have maxed out Blunt with books and maxed out Perfect Suppression as well, so reaching 5x3 would be pretty easy, but I just cheaped out on the necklace, which has Preemptive Strike on it instead of Perfect Suppression. So I could get 5x3 if I had a little bit of, like 3 points in Perfect Suppression on the necklace, but it's just a 5% damage increase, so I cheaped out there. I cheaped out, okay? So that being said, let's talk about the set effect real quick and how Lightning Fury interacts with all of this, okay? So maybe you saw already my battle items are a little bit weird because I'm running Flame Grenade, and Flame Grenade actually procs both Lightning Fury and the set. But first, maybe I should explain what that even does. So let's just use Grind Chain as an example. Grind Chain has a lot of hits and just keeps going, and also have a bleed rune on it. So as you can see, the Lightning Fury keeps stacking even from the bleed rune. So just by using Grind Chain, I got 4 Lightning Fury stacks. Once I hit 5 stacks, Lightning Fury will explode and deal damage around me, which was like 820,000 here. And since this build is so fixed on multiple hits, this is very easy to stack. And it's also, as you saw, stackable with not only the rune bleed, but every other bleed in the build. It has a 1-second internal cooldown, so overstacking is not super useful, but for consistency's sake, it's not horrible, right? So it's very easy to proc Lightning Fury orb stacks with all of these abilities. And on top of that, maybe you see sometimes a little bit of a lightning coming down there. That is actually the set effect. Now, the set effect of Charming is on successful hit, gain a chance to trigger an electric attack. That was the little lightning you saw, right? Which obviously, once we have a 6 set, this will all be amplified and basically, well, alternate between electric and flame attacks, and those are done also applying vulnerabilities and therefore do more damage. So, but the gist of it is it procs damage, lightning and fire attacks, essentially, from hits. And it has a 0.5 second internal cooldown, so it's half of Lightning Fury. Interesting here is this actually procs Lightning Fury stacks as well and is a little bit delayed. So for example, if I put Slasher here, sometimes you can see lightning coming down a little bit later. Maybe I can show you that. There you saw that. The 160k hit there, that was the one from the set. That's a little bit delayed. So in a lot of cases, if your Lightning Fury was on internal cooldown or it didn't proc, the delayed hit of the set makes Lightning Fury even more consistent. And on top of that, the Lightning Fury proc itself, so this little explosion around me, can proc the set too. So essentially you're double using procs and procking off of each other, which makes this, well, viable in that sense, right? Also interesting, Lightning Fury actually procs off of everything, including the bleeds, as I said, awakening, even auto attacking. And if you didn't know, the Shadowhunter auto attacks are actually, well, very, very fast, and there's a lot of them, right? So it works very well with this. If you have something off cooldown or everything is on cooldown, right? Then auto attacking is even good. And the same goes for your awakening, and obviously you can't use the other awakening anyways. But this one has a lot of hits as well, and this also procs your set and Lightning Fury as well. So that's really good as on top of that, and it has a lot of hits and is really nice to use. Okay, so that basically, I think, explained how those two things work. Maybe really quickly I'll show you a short rotation just in the beginning, what I would do in the beginning of a fight. Obviously it depends if you have enough for encroachment release on this one or not, but you can swap around as much as you want essentially. But the first 3 abilities are key here. You start off with your synergy, which is obviously your grind chain, and then into Cruel Cutter and your judgment. So you get the judgment one into awakening, and then you basically can press anything in any order as long as you keep it in that judgment window. Because as you see now, this only has like a 4-minute cooldown instead of a 5-minute, because we procced the judgment before, right? The judgment and conviction runes. But this, like grind chain into Cruel Cutter, into Slasher, or whatever is your judgment tool, could also be Sharpen Cut, is incredibly good. And then you can even use that with the awakening, so your awakening has lower cooldown, and obviously you want to, put as many abilities in that judgment window as you can. I would also suggest that you use your Piercing Thorn a little bit later, so you don't overstack too much. So something like this, you go here, then you go into your Cruel Cutter, into your Slasher, maybe Spinning Weapon, into your Awakening, Decimate, Enhance. And then maybe at the very end of that Judgment buff window, you drop Piercing Thorn, so you have another ability that keeps proccing things, essentially, right? While your other abilities, are waiting to come back up. And also, it is always important to keep grind chain up as much as you can, even if that means overstacking, because the synergy buff is nice not only for yourself but for all of your teammates as well. And having the bleed up all the time also procs your Lightning Fury, and even if you don't have a lot up, keep auto attacking while you can still, you know, look at things, because it will keep proccing your set and it will keep proccing a Lightning Fury. So it's a really good filler. Unlike most classes where auto attacks are pretty trash, in this build they're actually quite useful because they still proc your big damages. Let's talk about gems really quickly. I don't have a whole lot of gems set up yet, but I have a decent idea of what I want to do here. Since you only have 11 slots for gems, the perfect setup in my opinion for this build would be double on Cruel Cutter, so damage and cooldown, nothing on Slasher, double on Thrust Impact, which is 4, Grind Chain with cooldown reduction, 5, double on Spinning Weapon, which is 7, double on Decimate, which is 9, and then cooldown reduction on Piercing Thorn and cooldown reduction on Demonic Slash, which makes it 11 in total. And card set is very obvious because it's just the crit set for now. Eventually you want to swap that out for the light salvation set, right? But until then, I would highly recommend the crit rate because it just works very well with the rest of your kit. And that's basically the entire setup for this very budget Shadowhunter build. If you have any questions, leave them down below, and I will have a little Deskaluda fight at the end just so you can see the build in action a little bit. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Have a good one. If you liked the video, consider subscribing. If you want to ask me any questions, leave them below or just come over to Twitch. See you there. Bye bye.